My life seemed perfect, or so I thought. I had a loving husband who supported me in every way and a comfortable home where we shared countless moments of happiness. My younger sister, Emily, was my closest confidant. She was vibrant and full of curiosity, always asking about every aspect of my life. As the eldest, I had always looked out for her, treating her almost like a daughter at times. I assumed her constant visits were a sign of how much she admired and cared for me. Emily had been coming over more frequently lately, sometimes unannounced. At first, I thought little of it. She claimed she enjoyed spending time with us and loved how perfect my marriage appeared. She would often sit with us after dinner, asking questions about how my husband and I made our relationship work. Her questions were innocent at first, things like how we communicated so well or how we kept the spark alive after years of marriage. I answered them candidly, believing she was genuinely curious. However, as weeks passed, her curiosity began to feel invasive. She would laugh a little too loudly at my husband's jokes, linger a little too long during their conversations, and even started asking more personal questions, ones that didn't sit well with me. Questions about our intimacy, how often we argued, and what my husband liked or disliked in a partner. I shrugged it off as harmless, telling myself she was just curious about relationships since she'd never had a serious one herself. But then there were the moments that I couldn't quite ignore. My husband seemed to be a bit more guarded when Emily was around. He would stiffen slightly when she entered the room or glance at me nervously when she asked him a question directly. I began to feel a growing unease. Was it just my imagination? Was I being paranoid? Emily, on the other hand, seemed oblivious to my discomfort. She stayed later and later each evening, often waiting until my husband and I were ready to head to bed before she'd leave. She started helping him with small tasks around the house, things I would normally handle, like setting the table or offering to help him fix minor household issues. I noticed her lingering near him, standing a bit too close, her laugh a bit too warm. Despite my unease, I couldn't bring myself to say anything. She was my sister, after all. I didn't want to assume the worst or accuse her of anything inappropriate. I told myself I was overthinking it, letting my mind twist innocent gestures into something sinister. Yet, deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. One night, as Emily prepared to leave, she hugged me tightly and said, "You're so lucky. You have everything I've always wanted." Her words, though seemingly harmless, lingered with me long after she left. Was it envy I heard in her voice? Or was it something more? My heart felt heavy as I went to bed that night, the nagging feeling in my chest growing stronger with each passing day. Days turned into weeks, and my unease only grew stronger. Emily's visits became more frequent, and her behavior felt more calculated. My husband, James, started acting differently too. At first, it was subtle, avoiding eye contact when Emily was around or seeming overly attentive when she spoke. He laughed at her jokes, sometimes in a way that felt too intimate, too personal. I tried to dismiss it, chalking it up to my overactive imagination, but the signs were becoming harder to ignore. One evening, I came home earlier than expected from an errand. I walked into the house to find Emily and James in the living room, sitting closer than they should have been. The atmosphere felt charged, though nothing outright inappropriate was happening. They jumped when they saw me, their faces a mixture of surprise and discomfort. James quickly stood up, mumbling something about needing to check on dinner, while Emily gave me a nervous smile. I didn't say anything, but my instincts told me something was off. Then there was the late-night phone call. I had gone to bed early, leaving James in the living room. Waking up to get a glass of water, I heard his voice in hushed tones. He was on the phone, speaking quietly but with a tone that was unmistakably flirtatious. My heart sank when I caught a glimpse of the name on the screen, Emily. I froze, unsure of what to do. The conversation ended quickly, and James slipped into bed as if nothing had happened. I lay awake that night, my mind racing with questions and doubts. The following day, I decided to check his phone. My hands trembled as I unlocked it, feeling a mixture of guilt and desperation. What I found shattered me, a string of messages between James and Emily, filled with playful banter, inside jokes, and compliments that crossed every boundary. While nothing explicitly incriminating was said, the tone was far too familiar, far too intimate for comfort. My chest tightened as I scrolled through the messages, each one a blow to my trust and sense of security. I wanted to confront them both right then and there, but I hesitated. What if I was overreacting? What if this was just harmless joking? But deep down, I knew better. There was a line that had been crossed, and their secrecy only confirmed my worst fears. Over the next few days, I began to watch them more closely. I noticed how Emily's demeanor changed when James entered the room, how her voice softened, how she always seemed to find a reason to be near him. James, too, seemed more distracted, as if carrying a weight he couldn't share with me. Their interactions were brief but loaded, filled with stolen glances and an unspoken tension that I couldn't ignore. I felt trapped in my own home, drowning in a sea of betrayal. I needed proof, something undeniable. I resolved to wait, to gather the evidence I needed before confronting them. It was a painful decision, but I knew I couldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment. I needed clarity, no matter how much it hurt. The day I decided to leave work early was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made. My instincts screamed at me to find the truth, no matter how much it would hurt. I had told James I'd be home late and deliberately didn't let Emily know my plans. As I parked outside the house, my hands shook with a mixture of fear and determination. Part of me prayed I was wrong, that I'd walk in and find nothing unusual. But deep down, I knew. When I opened the door, the house was eerily quiet. The living room was empty, but I could hear faint voices coming from the bedroom, my bedroom. My heart pounded as I made my way down the hall, each step feeling heavier than the last. When I pushed the door open, the sight before me confirmed my worst fears. James and Emily were there, caught in an intimate moment that left no room for misinterpretation. They froze, their faces etched with guilt and panic. For a moment, no one said anything. The silence was deafening, the weight of their betrayal suffocating. Finally, I found my voice, though it trembled with rage and heartbreak. I demanded an explanation, though I knew there was no justification for what I had just witnessed. James stammered, his words a tangled mess of apologies and excuses. He claimed it was a mistake, a moment of weakness that spiraled out of control. Emily, on the other hand, didn't deny anything. She looked at me with tear-filled eyes and whispered, "I was curious. I wanted to understand what made your relationship so special." Her words felt like a slap across my face, as if my pain was nothing more than a side effect of her selfish experiment. The confrontation was raw and ugly. I unleashed years of frustration, anger, and heartbreak, demanding to know how they could do this to me. Emily tried to apologize, but her words rang hollow. James begged for forgiveness, promising it had only happened once, though the texts and late-night calls suggested otherwise. Their betrayal felt like a knife twisting deeper with every word they spoke. I couldn't hold back the tears. My voice cracked as I asked James if he had ever truly loved me, if our marriage had meant anything to him. He insisted it did, that he had made a terrible mistake, but his words felt meaningless in the face of his actions. Turning to Emily, I told her she had not only betrayed me as a sister but as a person. She had taken the one thing I thought I could always count on, family, and destroyed it. Her face crumbled under the weight of my words, but I felt no sympathy. As the confrontation came to a head, I realized I had a choice to make. I could forgive them, try to rebuild the pieces of my shattered life, or I could walk away and never look back. The weight of that decision pressed down on me, leaving me feeling broken and lost. I needed time to think, to process, and to decide what was best for me. Without another word, I turned and walked out, leaving them both to face the consequences of their betrayal. After leaving the house, I found myself sitting in my car, staring at nothing. My mind replayed the scene over and over, each moment cutting deeper into my heart. The betrayal felt unbearable, but amidst the pain, a sense of clarity began to emerge. This was not my fault. Their actions, their choices, they were not a reflection of my worth but of their flaws. That realization gave me the strength to start thinking about what came next. The days that followed were some of the hardest of my life. I moved into a friend's guest room temporarily, needing space to process everything. James called me relentlessly, leaving voicemails filled with apologies and pleas for another chance. Emily, too, tried to reach out, her messages filled with regret and promises to make things right. But I wasn't ready to face them. I needed to focus on myself, on finding peace after the chaos they had brought into my life. I spent hours reflecting on my marriage and my relationship with Emily. The warning signs I had ignored, the moments I had dismissed as harmless, they all came rushing back with painful clarity. But instead of dwelling on the what-ifs, I started to focus on the lessons I could take from this. I realized I had spent so much of my life putting others first, trying to be the perfect wife, the perfect sister, that I had forgotten to prioritize my own happiness. One day, I received a letter from Emily. It was long and filled with remorse, but one part stood out. She wrote, "I never meant to hurt you, but I see now how selfish I was. I thought I was curious about your life, but the truth is, I envied you. I wanted what you had, but instead of building something of my own, I tried to take it from you. I'm so sorry." Her words were honest, but they didn't erase the pain she had caused. James, on the other hand, tried to meet me in person. I agreed, not because I wanted to reconcile, but because I needed closure. When we met, he admitted his guilt, acknowledging that he had betrayed not only me but also himself. He said he had no excuse, only regret, and promised to respect whatever decision I made about our future. In the end, I chose to let them both go. Forgiveness didn't mean allowing them back into my life, it meant releasing the anger that threatened to consume me. I filed for divorce, determined to rebuild my life on my terms. As for Emily, I told her I needed space, possibly forever. Family bonds can be strong, but trust, once broken, is not easily repaired. Through it all, I learned a powerful lesson: self-respect and boundaries are essential. Sometimes, love and loyalty blind us to the harm others cause, but true strength lies in knowing when to walk away. I may have lost my marriage and my relationship with my sister, but I gained something far more valuable: my sense of self-worth and the courage to start anew.